Have you ever sat across from someone you thought you knew better than anyone, only to realize in one single instant that maybe you never knew them at all? Have you ever felt your entire life shift, like the ground beneath you split open, from just one text message? Because that's exactly what happened to me last night. And now, I don't even know who I am married to anymore. My name is Anna, I'm 30 years old, and until yesterday, I thought my life was ordinary, maybe even boring in that comfortable kind of way. 7 years married, same little apartment with the faint smell of pasta sauce soaked into the walls, the same arguments about who left the dishes in the sink, the same laughter when we'd collapse on the couch at the end of the day. Nothing perfect, but nothing tragic either. At least, that's what I believed. We were having dinner, nothing special. Just penne pasta I'd thrown together with garlic and olive oil, a half-stale loaf of bread from the corner bakery, and a cheap bottle of red wine we picked up because it was on sale. He sat across from me, fork in one hand, phone in the other, scrolling like always. It used to annoy me, how he never seemed fully there anymore, but last night it was different. Last night, that tiny, normal moment cracked everything wide open. He chuckled, this low, surprised laugh, and muttered under his breath, "Wow, I can't believe she actually texted back." At first, I thought I misheard him. I actually froze mid-bite, full covering in front of me. Something in his tone, almost delighted, almost guilty, made my stomach twist. "Who?" I asked. The color drained from his face so fast it was like I'd caught him in a crime. He swallowed hard, set his fork down too carefully, and stammered, just a coworker. Nothing important. And then, like a coward, he excused himself and slipped into the bathroom. I sat there, my heart pounding so loud I could hear it echo in my ears. My hands trembled on the table, but I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I was just overthinking like I sometimes do. And then, his phone lit up. Right there, on the wooden table between our two half-empty wine glasses, a message appeared on the screen. The preview was impossible to miss. It said, "Can't wait to see you again." My breath caught in my throat. My body went cold, like someone had poured ice water straight into my veins. I didn't touch the phone. I didn't unlock it. I didn't need to. Those words were enough. They screamed louder than any proof I could have searched for. I just sat there, staring at the pasta wilting on my plate, and it felt like I was staring at the ruins of my marriage. 7 years. 7 years of laughter, fights, lazy Sunday mornings, plans we made for a future. Suddenly they all felt like lies. I thought I knew this man. I thought I knew his heart. But in that one instant, it was like he became a stranger sitting in my kitchen. And yet, I didn't move. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat there in silence, like my body had shut down while my mind kept screaming inside. I felt like I was floating outside myself, watching this scene unravel in slow motion, knowing I'd never forget it for the rest of my life. When he came back from the bathroom, he avoided my eyes. He picked up his fork like nothing had happened. He didn't even notice his phone screen was still glowing. And I couldn't bring myself to ask. Not yet. Because how do you even form the words? How do you look at someone you've shared a bed with for years and ask them who they really are? How do you ask without breaking yourself in half? That's where I am right now. Suspended between the life I thought I had and the truth that just cracked through it. I haven't said a single word to him. Not yet, but every second that passes feels like I'm living with a stranger, and the silence is suffocating me. The rest of dinner was unbearable. I pushed food around my plate, pretending to eat while my chest caved in under the weight of everything unsaid. He chewed in silence, scrolled again, even laughed softly at something on his screen. I wanted to scream, to rip the phone out of his hands, to demand who is she. But instead, I sat there, smiling faintly whenever his eyes flicked up, like nothing was wrong. My body played along with the scene while inside, I was shattering. I excused myself first, told him I was tired, and went into the bedroom. But I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, every creak in the apartment magnified. Minutes stretched like hours, and my mind spun itself into knots. Who was she? How long had this been going on? Was it new, or had I been blind for years? When he finally came to bed, I kept my breathing steady, pretending to be asleep. His weight dipped the mattress, his arm brushed mine, and it felt alien. Like some intruder had crawled into my bed and stolen my husband's face. I held myself still, resisting the urge to pull away. I wanted to believe this was just some stupid mistake, a flirtation that hadn't gone too far. But that message, "Can't wait to see you again," burned itself into my skull. Sleep never came. I listened to his breathing deepen until it turned into soft snores, and only then did I let the tears come, silent and hot, soaking the pillow. My throat ached from holding back the sobs. I turned away from him, clutching the blanket, and whispered into the dark, "Why?" The morning light felt cruel. He kissed my forehead before leaving for work, the way he always did. Like nothing had happened, like my world wasn't falling apart. I forced a smile, waved goodbye, and the second the door shut, my body collapsed. I sat on the kitchen floor, knees pulled to my chest, the phone on the table glaring at me. It sat there, black screen, silent, yet it held all the answers. My hands itched to grab it, to unlock it, to finally know. But some part of me resisted, because once I saw what was inside, there would be no going back. All day, my mind played scenes like a broken projector. Was he texting her while I was cooking dinner? Was he with her when he said he was working late? Was I sitting here waiting, loving him, while he was giving pieces of himself to someone else? I thought of the way he used to look at me, the kind of gaze that felt like the sun warming every corner of my soul. When had that stopped? Had I missed the exact moment when his eyes shifted from me to her? By evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to know the truth. I told myself I wasn't going to snoop. I wasn't that kind of wife. But desperation is louder than morals. And when his phone buzzed on the nightstand as he showered, my hand moved on its own. The screen lit up. Another message. Last night was perfect. Same time next week. My stomach flipped. My hand trembled as I pressed the screen, my heart slamming against my ribs. The thread opened. Dozens of messages. Dozens of hearts. Dozens of I miss yous. Pictures. Her name, Sophie. I don't even remember breathing. The words blurred together, the timeline stretching back weeks, maybe months. He had built another world in secret, a world where I didn't exist. The shower turned off. Panic surged through me. I tossed the phone back onto the nightstand and darted into the kitchen, hands shaking so violently I could barely pour a glass of water. When he came out, towel around his waist, humming to himself, I smiled at him. Smiled. My lips curved like I wasn't bleeding inside. My voice stayed even as I asked how his day was. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't ready to confront him. Not yet. Not until I decided what my next move would be. Because this wasn't just betrayal. This was war, and I was going to make him regret ever thinking I was blind. The days that followed were a blur of shadows and forced smiles. I walked through my own home like an actress in a play I no longer believed in. I laughed at his jokes, kissed him goodbye in the mornings, and even asked about his long days at work. But behind my eyes, behind every nod and smile, my mind was racing. I needed answers. I needed to know who Sophie really was. Was she just a fling? Someone from his office? Or worse, was she already tangled in our lives without me realizing it? The first clue came on a Wednesday night. He came home late, smelling faintly of cologne he never wore around me anymore. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie loose, and his excuse was the same as always. Sorry, babe. Late meeting, but this time, when he tossed his jacket over the chair, a small slip of paper fluttered out of the pocket. It was a receipt, a restaurant, 2 in tray, a bottle of wine, and it wasn't the cheap pasta and discount wine we usually shared. It was expensive, romantic, the kind of place you reserve for special occasions. I felt my breath catch, my pulse thunder in my ears. He didn't notice me pick it up, didn't notice me slip it quietly into my pocket. Later that night, when he fell asleep with his back turned to me, I stared at the ceiling with that receipt clutched in my hand. My marriage was unraveling, thread by thread, and he didn't even see it. The next day, I drove to that restaurant, sat in the parking lot, staring at the glowing sign like it held all my answers. I almost went in, almost asked the hostess if they remembered him. But fear stopped me, fear of hearing the truth out loud. So instead, I sat there, engine off, hands gripping the wheel until my knuckles turned white, and whispered to myself, "Not yet. Be patient. Wait for the right moment." Back at home, I began noticing things I had overlooked before. His sudden interest in grooming. The way he guarded his phone like it was a lifeline. The late-night texts he'd hide under the blanket, the faint smile curling his lips as his thumbs moved across the screen. Each detail was another knife twisting deeper. And yet, I stayed quiet. Because silence, I realized, was power. If he didn't know I knew, then I controlled the game. One night, I almost broke. He was in the shower again, steam filling the bathroom, his phone vibrating against the counter. The name Sophie flashed across the screen, bold, mocking me. My hands hovered above the phone, shaking, itching to read everything. But then, he stepped out. For one terrifying second, our eyes met in the mirror. His wet hair clung to his forehead, a towel around his waist, and I swear I saw suspicion flicker in his eyes. Like he could sense I was getting closer. Like he knew I was no longer the oblivious wife he had been lying to. I pulled my hand back, heart hammering, forcing a smile as I said, "You left your phone buzzing." He nodded casually, too casually, and picked it up. "Work stuff," he muttered. But I saw it, the quick glance, the tightening of his jaw, the flicker of guilt before he looked away. And in that moment, I knew. He was slipping, his perfect facade was cracking. All I had to do was wait for it to shatter completely. It happened on a Friday night. I remember because the city outside our window was alive with weekend laughter, but inside our apartment, the silence was razor sharp. He came home late again, his shirt wrinkled, the faint smell of perfume that wasn't mine clinging to him. I watched him from the couch as he loosened his tie, avoiding my eyes. My hands trembled in my lap, but my voice was steady when I finally said it. "Who's Sophie?" The sound of her name cut through the air like a blade. His head snapped up, his face pale, eyes wide. For a moment, the mask slipped completely. Fear, guilt, shock. Then, just as quickly, he forced a laugh. "What? Sophie, she's just a coworker. Why?" I held his gaze, my voice calm, almost eerily so. "Coworkers don't send heart emojis. They don't write, 'Last night was perfect.'" The color drained from his face. He opened his mouth, closed it, then started pacing. "Anna, it's not what you think." I stood, every nerve in my body trembling but my spine straight as steel. "Then tell me what it is. Tell me why I've been lying next to a stranger every night. Tell me why I'm reading love notes from another woman on my husband's phone." His silence was the loudest confession I had ever heard. When he finally spoke, it wasn't an apology. It wasn't regret. It was a pathetic, whispered excuse. It just, happened. Something inside me snapped. 7 years of loyalty, trust, love, all reduced to those 3 cowardly words. It just happened. I stepped closer, my voice low but trembling with fury. You don't trip and fall into someone's bed. You don't accidentally build another life behind your wife's back. You made a choice. Every text, every lie, every time you came home and kissed me like nothing was wrong. Those were choices. He flinched like I'd struck him. His lips parted, but no words came. He couldn't deny it anymore. And then, just when I thought I couldn't feel any more shattered, his phone buzzed on the counter. Her name, Sophie. I picked it up before he could stop me. Opened the message. My hands shook as I read it out loud. I told you she'd find out eventually. Just leave her already. The room tilted. My chest tightened. My knees almost gave out. Because this wasn't just an affair. She knew about me. She wasn't some hidden secret in the shadows. She was waiting for him to abandon me. She was confident enough to demand it. And him, he stood there, silent, his eyes darting anywhere but mine. That silence told me everything. He wasn't sorry. He wasn't going to stop. He wasn't even fighting for me. The man I thought was my partner, my anchor, my safe place, was gone. Maybe he had been gone for a long time, and I was only now opening my eyes to it. I set the phone down carefully, like it was a loaded weapon. My hands were steady now, my tears burned dry. When I spoke, my voice was calm, almost terrifyingly calm. You've made your choice. Now it's my turn. And with that, I walked into the bedroom, shut the door behind me, and for the first time in 7 years, I slept alone. But that night, as I lay staring into the dark, something new flickered inside me. It wasn't just grief. It wasn't just rage. It was resolve. This wasn't going to break me. No, this was the beginning of me taking everything back. The next morning, I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't even ask him what he wanted. I simply got up, brewed my coffee, and started making lists. Because while he had been busy building lies, I had been building strength without even realizing it. I called a lawyer, quietly, calmly. The woman on the phone had a firm voice, one that made me feel like I wasn't walking into destruction but into freedom. She told me exactly what documents to gather, what steps to take, and by noon, I had already set the wheels in motion. He didn't suspect a thing. He thought my silence meant surrender. He thought I was broken, defeated, willing to look the other way just to keep him. That was his mistake. Over the next few days, I became a shadow with a plan. I collected bank statements, tracked his late nights, documented every slip of evidence. Each piece of proof was a brick in the wall I was building, not to trap myself in, but to protect myself when I finally walked away. And here's the cruel, beautiful irony. The more he lied, the calmer I became. I'd watch him kiss my cheek on his way out, for work, and I'd smile, knowing he had no idea that every step he took was bringing him closer to his own downfall. Then came the day. I waited until he left, and then I packed. Not in a frenzy, not in tears. Methodically. Clothes, essentials, the photo albums I couldn't leave behind. I left the cheap wine glasses on the counter, the pasta-stained pots in the cupboard, the bed that had become a stranger's territory. When he came home that night, arms full of groceries like nothing had changed, the apartment was empty except for a single envelope on the kitchen table. Inside, divorce papers, and a note written in my neatest handwriting. You chose her. I'm choosing me. Don't contact me again. I can only imagine his face when he read it. Shock, maybe anger, maybe even regret, but none of that mattered anymore. Because for the first time in years, his choices no longer dictated my life. That night, I checked into a small hotel room with plain white sheets and a window overlooking the city. And as I lay there, alone but free, I realized something I never thought I would. Yes, he betrayed me. Yes, he broke me. But he also gave me something I never knew I had, the strength to walk away from someone who didn't value me. And that strength, that was mine to keep. Now, when I look back, I don't see a marriage ending. I see a woman awakening. I see Anna, the real Anna, finally stepping out from the shadows of someone else's lies. And if you're listening to this, if you've ever felt that kind of betrayal, let me tell you this, you are stronger than you think. Don't let someone else's choices define your worth. Don't waste yourself on someone who treats your love like it's disposable. Walk away, rebuild, take everything back, because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't shouting, isn't fighting, isn't making them pay. It's living a life so full, so free, so unapologetically yours, that they'll never be able to touch you again. The weeks that followed felt like learning how to breathe again. At first, it was strange, waking up alone, pouring just one cup of coffee, walking into a quiet apartment with no footsteps echoing behind me. But slowly, the silence transformed. It stopped feeling empty. It started feeling mine. I got a new job offer, one I had been too afraid to chase before. I signed the papers, took a deep breath, and stepped into a career that was mine alone, untouched by his shadow. I went out with friends I hadn't seen in years, laughed until my cheeks hurt, discovered little joys that had been buried under years of routine and neglect. And yet, sometimes, in the quietest hours of the night, I thought of him. Not with longing, not even with anger, but with clarity. I saw him for what he truly was, a man too weak to be honest, too selfish to be loyal, too blind to see the woman he had standing right in front of him. The last time I saw him was in a coffee shop, months after the divorce papers were finalized. I hadn't planned it. I was just there, working on my laptop, sipping my latte. And then, there he was. Same eyes, same smirk, but dimmer somehow. Tired, worn, and next to him, Sophie. She didn't look like the fantasy one had painted in my head. She looked ordinary, human, and in that moment, something inside me clicked. I didn't feel hate. I didn't feel jealousy. I felt nothing, because they deserved each other. Two people built on secrets and lies, sitting across from each other in a cafe, pretending that what they had was love. Maybe it was, in their own twisted way, but it wasn't mine to carry anymore. I closed my laptop, stood up, and walked past them without a word. He looked up, startled, his mouth opening like he wanted to say something. But I didn't stop. I didn't need to. As I pushed the door open and stepped out into the sunlight, I realized the truth. The opposite of love isn't hate. It's indifference. And I had finally reached it. That night, as I curled up in my new apartment, with fairy lights strung along the walls and a stack of books by my bed, I felt lighter than I had in years. The past was behind me, the future was wide open, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid. Because here's the secret no one tells you about heartbreak: it doesn't just break you. It builds you. It strips away everything false until you're left with the raw, unshakable core of who you really are. I am Anna, 30 years old, and I am no longer the woman who sat in silence while her husband lied across the table. I am no longer the wife waiting for crumbs of affection from a man who didn't value me. I am the woman who walked away, the woman who rebuilt, the woman who turned betrayal into freedom. So I'll leave you with this. If you were sitting at that dinner table, staring at that glowing phone, and your whole world cracked wide open, what would you do? Would you stay, hoping broken trust could be glued back together? Or would you walk away and take everything back, piece by piece, until you became whole again? Comment below. Share your truth, because someone out there might need your story to find their strength too. And if you want more stories that hit your heart and keep you on the edge of your seat, make sure to subscribe. Because this this was only the beginning. Healing didn't happen all at once. People like to tell you that time heals everything, but the truth is, time only gives you the space to do the work yourself. And the work was brutal. Some mornings, I woke up with fire in my chest, ready to conquer the world. Other mornings, I couldn't even pull myself out of bed, the memory of his betrayal pressing down on me like a weight I couldn't shake. Healing, I learned, wasn't a straight line. It was messy, jagged, and unpredictable. I started therapy. I walked into that office terrified of saying the words out loud, afraid that admitting my husband's betrayal would make me look weak. But my therapist leaned forward with kind eyes and said, "Anna, surviving betrayal isn't weakness. Staying silent about it is. You've already done the bravest thing by leaving." Those words became my anchor. I began journaling, pouring every rage-filled thought, every tender memory, every unanswered question onto the page. My journal became a battlefield where I fought myself, forgave myself, and eventually freed myself. But life has a cruel way of testing you just when you start to feel strong again. It was 3 months after the divorce. I was walking home from work, the city buzzing with Friday night energy, when I saw him. My ex-husband, standing on the opposite corner, phone in hand, staring at me like a ghost from another life. Our eyes locked across the street. For a split second, it felt like time folded in on itself, pulling me back to every dinner, every kiss, every lie. He took a step forward like he wanted to cross the street. My heart pounded, my breath caught, and then my phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number. I shouldn't have let you go. I froze, looked up. His phone was still in his hand, his eyes locked on me. The world spun. For a heartbeat, the old me, the woman who once begged for scraps of his love, almost surfaced. The ache, the longing, the "what if" whispered through my bones. But then, I remembered Sophie. I remembered that glowing screen, the hearts, the lies, the nights I cried silently into my pillow while he slept beside me. And just like that, the spell broke. I unlocked my phone, typed 3 words, and hit send. Too late now. Then I turned and walked away, my heels striking the pavement like a drumbeat of freedom. I didn't look back. Not once. That night, for the first time, I slept without nightmares. No ghosts in the corners. No weight on my chest. Just peace. And maybe that's what healing really is. Not erasing the past, not pretending the pain never happened, but finally reaching the day when you can stare at the person who broke you and feel absolutely nothing. The next chapter of my life didn't feel like starting over. It felt like starting for the first time. I moved into a small apartment with pale blue walls and wide windows that let the morning sun spill across the floor. There was no scent of stale pasta, no echoes of lies in the corners. Just me, my space, my rules. I filled it slowly. Plants on the windowsill, candles on the counter, photographs of me instead of us. It was strange at first, like learning how to walk again, but each little change stitched a piece of me back together. I started traveling, something I had always wanted but had put off because he didn't like flying. I booked a weekend trip alone. I wandered through unfamiliar streets, sat in cafes with strangers, tasted food I couldn't pronounce, and for the first time in years, I laughed so hard my chest hurt. Every step away from him was a step closer to myself. And people noticed. Friends who had seen me shrink over the years began saying things like, "You look different, Anna." Lighter. My therapist called it reclaiming my identity. I called it finally breathing. But the true moment of transformation came one rainy evening, months later. I was walking home, umbrella in hand, when I passed a bookstore. On a whim, I stepped inside. The smell of old pages and ink wrapped around me, warm and safe. I wandered until I found a journal with a leather cover, its pages blank and waiting. That night, I sat at my desk, opened the first page, and wrote in bold letters. This is not the story of how he broke me. This is the story of how I rebuilt. I wrote for hours, poured out everything, the pain, the betrayal, the rage, the lessons, the victories. And as the words filled the pages, I realized something that made me smile through the tears. My story wasn't just mine anymore. It was for every woman who had ever stared at a glowing phone screen and felt her world collapse. For every person who thought they couldn't leave, couldn't heal, couldn't survive. Because I had, and if I could, so could they. That's why I'm telling you this now. Not to dwell on betrayal. Not to paint myself as a victim. But to show you that survival is possible. That freedom is possible. That strength is possible, even when it feels like your world is ending. So here's the truth, the one I want you to carry with you long after this story ends. Sometimes the worst night of your life is actually the beginning of your best. Sometimes betrayal isn't the end. It's the invitation you never wanted, but needed to become who you were always meant to be. And sometimes, the most beautiful chapter begins the moment you close the book on someone who never deserved to be written into your story in the first place. So I'll ask you, one last time, if it were you, if the person you trusted most shattered your world with one message, one lie, one choice, what would you do? Would you stay, hoping broken trust could be glued back together? Or would you walk away and take everything back, piece by piece, until you became whole again? Because I chose me, and it was the best decision I ever made. Time has a strange way of healing. At first, the days dragged. Every sunrise felt like salt rubbed into an open wound, every night a replay of the same question, why wasn't I enough? But slowly, as the seasons turned, I realized it was never about me not being enough. It was about him never being capable of giving enough. And that's not my burden anymore. There are mornings now when I wake up and forget, for a moment, that I ever lived that other life. I brew coffee, open my window, feel the breeze on my face, and there's no ache in my chest. No waiting for footsteps down the hall. No silent wars at the dinner table. Just peace. The kind of peace that doesn't make headlines but feels like the greatest victory of all. Sometimes, I catch myself smiling at little things. The barista remembering my order, a dog wagging its tail at me on the street, the rain tapping against my window while I curl up with a book. These small, ordinary joys are what saved me. Not grand gestures, not dramatic revenge. Just reclaiming the ordinary, moment by moment, until it became extraordinary. But there are still nights when the memories creep in. Nights when I remember that message glowing on the screen, the way my stomach dropped, the way my trust burned to ashes in seconds. And I let myself feel it, because healing doesn't mean erasing. It means carrying the scar and choosing to walk anyway. One evening, months later, I saw him again. It wasn't planned. I was at the grocery store, holding a basket filled with fruit, when I turned a corner and there he was. His hair looked thinner, his eyes more tired, his smile forced. He froze when he saw me. I thought my heart would leap out of my chest, but instead, something strange happened. I felt nothing, no anger, no grief, no longing, just nothing. I gave him a polite nod, walked past, and left him standing there between the aisles of cereal boxes and canned soup. That was the moment I knew, truly knew, that I was free. Because indifference is the real closure. And that night, back in my apartment, I lit a candle, poured myself a glass of wine, and whispered to myself, "You did it. You made it out." The irony is, he thought his secret would destroy me. He thought his betrayal would define me. But in the end, it shaped me into someone he'll never have the privilege of knowing again. And maybe that's the biggest revenge of all, thriving. So here's the final truth I'll leave you with. Love isn't about losing yourself to keep someone else whole. It's about finding someone who sees all of you and says, "You are enough, just as you are." And if you can't find that yet, then at the very least, be that person for yourself. Because you deserve it. Now I want to ask you, if you were me, standing at that dinner table with pasta growing cold, staring at the phone that cracked your world in half, what would you have done? Would you have stayed silent, exploded, walked away immediately, or, like me, would you have carried the weight until you found the strength to set it down for good? Tell me in the comments. Share your story, because someone out there might need to hear that they're not alone, that healing is possible, that freedom is waiting. And if you want more stories like this, raw, real, and unforgettable, make sure you subscribe. Because sometimes, the stories we share are the very lifelines that pull someone else out of the dark. This is Anna's story, but in a way, it could be yours too. And maybe, just maybe, the ending you thought would break you is really the beginning that saves you. Some stories don't end with fireworks. Some don't end with revenge that makes headlines or a dramatic confrontation that leaves everyone speechless. Some stories end quietly, like a door clicking shut, a lock turning, a woman finally sleeping through the night without fear or doubt. And that's how mine ended. I didn't burn his clothes or sash his phone. I didn't send angry texts or expose him to the world. My revenge was simpler, living a life he'll never touch again. Because real power doesn't come from destruction. It comes from rebuilding. I used to replay our dinners, those evenings of silence and glowing screens, thinking that was just what marriage was supposed to look like, routine, tired, distant. But now, I know better. Love shouldn't feel like being invisible. It shouldn't feel like waiting for scraps of attention or choking down your questions so peace doesn't shatter. Love should feel like laughter spilling into the night. Like trust so deep that a phone left on the table is just a phone, not a ticking bomb. Like choosing each other over and over, not out of habit, but out of desire. And maybe someday I'll find that. Maybe I won't. But here's the secret I never thought I'd learn. I don't need it to be whole. One evening, much later, I sat by my window watching the city lights flicker like fireflies. A journal open, pen in hand, my reflection staring back at me in the glass. And I realized something that made my throat tighten. I wasn't writing about him anymore. I wasn't writing about the betrayal, the message, the dinner table. I was writing about me, my dreams, my future, my voice. That was the real turning point. Not the night he slipped, but the night I decided I wouldn't. And so my story ends here, with me, Anna, 30 years old, no longer defined by someone else's lies, but by my own strength. If you take nothing else from this, take this. Heartbreak isn't the end. It's a mirror. It shows you who you are when everything shatters. And sometimes, the person staring back is stronger, fiercer, more alive than you ever knew. So I'll leave you with a question, the kind that doesn't just ask for an answer, but demands you look at yourself honestly. When your world cracks open, when the person you trust most betrays you, will you let it break you? Or will you let it build you? The choice is always yours. And if you've been here with me, listening to my story, I want to thank you. Because sharing it isn't just about me, it's about us. About reminding every soul out there who feels trapped, betrayed, or broken that they are not alone. Comment below. Share your story. Let's build a space where pain turns into power and endings turn into beginnings. And don't forget, subscribe for more stories like this. Because sometimes, the right story at the right moment isn't just entertainment. It's survival. This is not the story of how my husband betrayed me. This is the story of how I found myself.